Hi, I'm Tomek from Neon Sprints, and I would like to talk to you about successful teams. Rather than talking to you about it from a general perspective, I would like to focus specifically on successful design sprint teams. Think of it as a cooking recipe. If you have the right ingredients and follow the cooking instructions properly, then you are up for a great meal. However, if you leave out an essential spice or cook it too long or too short, what will eventually happen is that you will end up with a frustrating outcome, and worst case scenario, we'll have to redo the whole thing again. So here are the top 5 make or break steps to get a successful team. Or if you prefer, here is your 5 ingredients recipe for a great design sprint team. The first step is to focus on roles and pick the right people. You are going to spend an intense week together in one room, so it is absolutely crucial to be able to rely on the expertise in the room. Firstly, consider the functional sprint roles. The facilitator, decider, the stitcher, the designer or designers or prototyper, whoever else you might need. These are the crucial ones. The most important ones are the facilitator and the decider. The facilitator obviously is the one facilitating the entire sprint, so it should be a person who has no problem standing in front of people, getting them through rough patches and discussions and making sure that you get to the right result. Ideally, they are a neutral person. The decider is a second important person in the room, and that's the person who makes the final decision once you realize that a decision needs to be made. The decider always has a final go, so it is very important that people trust this person and that they understand why this role in this function is the crucial one for the success of the sprint. Make sure that you pick the true decider. So have the real product owner be the decider. Find the right specialists in order to cover the biggest possible spectrum of the problem at hand. What does that mean? Well, typically in a design sprint, you're developing a new product or a new offering for your customer. So you need to make sure that there is someone in the room who actually understands the customers really well. Don't only get the designers and the engineers and the R&D people in the room. Make sure that you have someone from marketing and sales and someone who maybe has a daily contact with the customer. Customer service maybe. Even finance and accounting might be interesting because they also get in touch with the customer. So don't leave out these functions when you invite people for a sprint. Lastly, make sure that you have the right experts to interview on Monday in the beginning of a sprint. They don't necessarily have to be people from outside of the team. If you have the right team together, you will have experts on this team, and you might start by interviewing some of them on Monday morning. However, if you want to provide some additional insights into the topic, it might make sense to invite somebody from outside. Step number 2 is to value each role. It is absolutely essential that everybody has a sense of purpose for themselves when they join the team. There is nothing that kills the sprint spirit more than if people start asking, why am I actually here?
Hey, what happened?
This is the worst that can happen to you. In order to avoid this kind of situation, make sure that you onboard everybody before the actual sprint. What does it mean? You can have either a joint meeting or individual talks with the people and brief them on beforehand. A, on what the actual sprint is, and B, what the crucial roles in a sprint are. Make sure that everybody understands why their input is so valuable for the success of what you're actually doing. It cannot be that somebody sits in the room and is completely detached and has the feeling that they cannot contribute anything. They are there because they have true insights in what your customer needs or wants. Empower people throughout the sprint ongoingly and make sure that everybody constantly has the feeling of purpose while they are participating in your design sprint. Step number 3, set clear goals and define these goals together with your team and get everybody's commitment for them. Consider the fact that in a typical team situation for a regular project, Next to the actual big goal, everybody gets their separate small goals as team members. That helps to align the team. Now, when it comes to sprint, you have to consider the fact that you obviously are going to be together only for 1 week. And in this 1 week, you're going to be working very intensely to achieve the team goal. So what's very important is to get this joint goal for the entire team, which is the sprint goal, derived from everybody's input, defined together, and at the end of the day committed to by everyone in the room. The good thing about this is that there is a stepwise build-up before you get to the actual goal. You start with the experts and you get some input from there. You do a how might we session, which we cover in a separate video. And only once you have this as input for everybody, everyone in the room provides their insight into what they think the goal for the sprint should be. This goal is then selected by everybody, and the final say is by the designer. The important thing is that everybody has a say in it, but you don't end up in endless discussions and at the end of the day coming up with some kind of a boiled down compromise that everybody feels kind of okay with, but nobody's really happy with. In a typical team situation with lengthy projects, people sometimes lose the actual goal and end up after a few weeks or even months with questions in their head. So why are we actually doing this? This cannot happen in a sprint. You will have to make sure that everybody has the goal in front of their eyes every step of the way. Step 4, structure the team's communication. Make sure that you get everybody's input and insight into the discussions, but without crippling the decision-making process. What demotivates teams greatly is when something is happening to them, with them, or around them, and they don't understand what's going on, they don't know where it came from, they weren't part of the decision-making process. So simply put, they don't even know what hit them. In a regular team situation with regular projects, you would end up with defining tools, channels, and different ways and means of communicating with each other to avoid these kind of situations. With a tight sprint time box structure, you will have to communicate way more effectively and efficiently with the entire team. Your means of communication will be pens, paper, post-its, whiteboards, and maybe dots, which will speed up immensely the entire decision-making process by noting and voting technique with the entire team. Make sure that you structure this input. Make sure that everybody in the room always understands exactly why they're providing this specific input at this particular point in time. Reconnect it at every stage in the sprint to the overall goal of the sprint that was decided on the first day. Make sure that the communication is structured by the facilitator. The facilitator sets the deadlines, the time frame, and the format of what is being communicated and how within a sprint. If you hit a rock somewhere along the way, because some of the people might find it a little bit challenging to communicate in this particular way, always refer them back to what you're trying to do and ask them to trust the method. Last and final step, step 5. Take care of your sprint team every step of the way. The chemistry part is important for any team, independent whether it's a sprint team or not. But design sprint teams and their chemistry have some specifics. So let's talk about that. First and foremost, make sure that you create a creativity-inducing environment. I know it sounds horrible, but what it actually means is you are going to ask the people in the room to become creative and produce a lot of creative input on a regular basis. Doing it in a gray room with a gray carpet and gray walls and gray people is not going to work particularly well for you. I can tell you from personal painful experience. So what do you need to do? Make sure that you create a comfortable environment for your sprint and choose your design sprint location very wisely. Think about creativity-inducing setup with alternative seating with breakout rooms, with outdoor possibilities for the people. Feed your team. Giving people lasagna for lunch will effectively slow down your creative process in the afternoon, and it doesn't matter how energized you're going to be in front of your team. Think about healthy snacks. Make sure that you have something light and something that will actually support your teamwork in the afternoon for lunch breaks. Think about brain food for the coffee breaks in the afternoon. Make sure that everybody can access it at any point in time throughout the entire sprint. Furthermore, make sure that your team feels comfortable along the way. There will be moments where the design sprint creates anxiety among people. Address this up front, already at the very beginning. Tell them that they will feel this way. Tell them that it's absolutely okay to feel this way. Tell them that it's okay to also say it so that you can resolve it for them. Lastly, but very importantly, try to anticipate and dissolve any tensions that might pop up in your team proactively, and address any difficult situations that might come up in discussions or in the process directly. Never bench a conflict. If you do that, it will always come back to bite you in your behind, and it will have grown and become much bigger and much more difficult to handle by then. One more absolute essential thing. When you're finished with your sprint, always make sure that you celebrate your failures and successes with your team. Since you've achieved this together, it's worth something, and it's very important to give it back to the team and show them your appreciation.
Hey, do you want to find out how to develop successful products faster? Subscribe to our YouTube channel, also to find out on how not to make YouTube videos.